Before I commence, I would like to make two corrections, adjustments. I lament that I did not hear Mr. Voskanyan's criticism of sociology. My presentation will not be immune to this criticism, but it's a difference in principle. Considering our experience of previous exchanges, I believe here it's also very important to clarify what sociology are we talking about, how we define the sociology, and consequently what we expect from it. And my communication is not academic at all. Frankly speaking, I believe that in this situation, in view of what transpired, and everyone was involved who was a member of this society in those events, I think academic ambitions here would be overblown. For me, it's more important to rethink the personal experience, which allows to understand your own problems and at the same time see how one could, all this considered, try to understand and make a sense out of whatever happened. In this respect, my ambitions are pretty low, so take it at its face value. When we talk about social solidarity agenda, we need to first clarify the title, which would introduce clarity into methodology of what we say and how we say it. Why solidarity to begin with? Solidarity is one of the nightmares of sociology. Beginning with the nascent stage of sociology when people had to address the following issue. How is it at all possible to have a society when you experience shocks and revolutions throughout, undermining stability, looking for a form of organization of sociology? Auguste Comte, the father of sociology, and subsequently Émile Durkheim, almost a freedom fighter in sociology, went to the determining the axiomatic idea of the lower common denominator in sociology. Don't be afraid of sociology coming up with this agenda. Society is only possible because we have solidarity. Failing that, we will just fight for survival as a species. He was born in a family of a minister, Durkheim. He still transposed religion, giving the society a pedestal and looking for the origins of morality or ethics in the society itself rather than in the divine. Quote, anything that is a source of solidarity is moral. Everything that makes people come up with other people's terms is moral. Anything that makes you behave in any other way than dictated by your own ego is moral. Morality is as strong as the more diverse and multiple these relations are. Considering this solidarity issue granted as something taken for granted, Durkheim discussed two types of solidarity. The first was mechanical solidarity, which was specific, according to him, to more traditional and small societies, and was something automatic by default because it came about on the basis of all of us being similar. We share the same lifestyles, the same experiences, the same educational and religious milieu, and therefore we're almost identical. Not being in solidarity with someone very similar to yourself would mean to some extent not being in solidarity with yourself. The second option comes about in more modern societies where we could look at increasingly specialized occupations, and solidarity is just an understanding of the necessity of your dependence on others. Since each one of us is responsible only for a small, narrow segment, in order to get a whole out of it, you have to operate jointly. Nevertheless, why solidarity? In order to get this, you have to understand the socio-historical and political situation which put in circulation the term of solidarity per self. If we make a reference to the socio-historical and political situation, then we need to understand that sociologists reflect on this concept of solidarity in a situation when that became a political notion. That is, we're speaking about the idea of fraternity, which through the Christian policies was borrowed and used as something that may be juxtaposed to the power of the family or the household. In order to be brethren and sisters, you did no longer have to be in kinship, and the concept of fraternity could apply also to diametrically and people who didn't have these links of blood in principle. So this was already a instrument of politics. And in the age of reason and with increasing prevalence of lay attitudes, this was reformulated as solidarity. And mostly this happened in the wake of the French Revolution, which used the political application of the concept of solidarity. In this period, a number of instruments were enshrined that already used solidarity as a notion. This was an obligation, for example, to apply solidarity. That assumed in situations where one of the members of the community, for example, owed something, and paying that debt back was deemed to be a communal duty. This was very specific entry into politics, and sociology, if one may say so, did what it subsequently reverted to quite often. It took a term with a political resonance and tried to conceptualize it as an academic possibility. Policy thus became backed by science. I do not claim it's necessarily bad, because I believe to some extent it's natural. That which is repeated continually needs to be analyzed and explained. Nevertheless, I believe that in the historical perspective, if it becomes a strategy, it also contributes to an academic notion becoming a political tool. To some extent, the revolution that proclaimed love and solidarity was against your game to politicize the toolkit of sociology. On the other hand, it was an attempt to resist the easy scientification of this notion by following the political agenda unconstrained. It is exactly for this reason that I find it appropriate to take a theoretical basis for this concept. The Russian anarchists Pyotr Kropotkin's approach towards mutual assistance and solidarity. Kropotkin wrote that mutual assistance is the basis for development. If you look back at human history, you will not be able to underestimate the role of solidarity. Solidarity is hinged on mutual assistance. There is a natural need that people have to help each other, and through it the society moves ahead, especially in times, even in those times when it seems as though everyone lives in his or her own individual shell and it's the government who should take care of everyone. Moreover, Kropotkin insisted on the need of socio-economic systems that would operate on base of horizontal voluntary networks. I would like to particularly emphasize that we're not talking about early 21st century when we were talking about network technologies in circulation. We're talking about end of 19th century, end of 20th century. I consider it very important for us when talking about the social networks to clearly make a distinction between technological networks and public social networks which had existed, I think, from early emergence of the society in the nascent stages thereof. If we try to understand what's the difference between Kropotkin's approach to with the classical definition of solidarity, we could take Sally Schultz's definition, which means solidarity is a time of mediation between an individual and the socium by assuming positive obligations. In fact, solidarity becomes a mediator between the individual and the society, and through this, the system is built. I believe that the emotionally overwhelming term being conceptualized towards the social tradition neutralizing formalization is fully salient here. What matters is that solidarity comes to the forefront as a magical, non-sensual something that mediates the relations of the socium and the individual. These relations being actual become the carrier which is so far unrevealed. This is what in Kropotkin's approach more vividly reflects the basis of voluntary horizontal networks for mutual assistance. Moreover, Kropotkin does not associate mutual assistance with emotionality. You do not have to be replete with love towards someone to help the latter. The natural need works and operates on an almost instinctive level. When we speak solidarity, we should consider that whatever concept we take as a basis, there are two basic paradoxes that we encounter. The first is, how do we balance the need for individual freedom with social relations? How do we arrive at an equilibrium between the rights and freedoms of an individual with the duties and obligations that the community and the society may impose? And this becomes a major issue in the context of dissemination of liberal ideology. How do you make solidarity inclusive if the possibility of solidarity already assumes exclusion of certain groups of individuals, because their existence is a prerequisite of the function of solidarity? Varam referred to that. I'll expand a little. Why social? Various works and papers on solidarity provide categorization of types of solidarity, where social solidarity is just one incarnation. In this respect, we could refer back to Sally Schultz's 2008 paper, Political Solidarity, where she makes a distinction between several forms. Parasitic solidarity, devoid of any substance. It just makes a reference to solidarity, but uses only the rhetoric thereof and has no content or substance. The salient examples are tree plantings and circle dances around solidarity. The classical example of parasitic one is the centennial of genocide and the declaration that was read out on the background of the Dark Memorial. The second type of solidarity Schultz calls political solidarity. Various authors use program solidarity for the same and some other terms, and this one pertains to the obligations that emerge in unfair situations where the individuals realize and opt for collective joint action. Unity around a particular situation or purpose rather than similar traditions or values. This is the solidarity of repressed groups against unfair situations and the oppressors. Political solidarity is a solidarity of resistance, which may outgrow into a revolution, and after that, or even without that, may transform or modify into some other type of solidarity. The options include, and Schultz says, civic solidarity, and this means the duties that the state should have vis-à-vis its own citizens, mostly pertains to the welfare state agenda and public policy addressing vulnerable groups. We clearly see this when minimum thresholds are established for consumer rights protection, health services, education, and other areas. So de facto, this is viewed as a condition for civic solidarity. It's important to understand that this perception of civic solidarity doesn't make it to be hinged on socially. This could be based on the minimum bearable social agenda of assuring minimum bearable conditions for the impoverished, which does not necessarily have to be concurrent with practices of social solidarity. And last but not least, it's social solidarity, which is what I am reflecting on. If we look at the same logic under which Schultz continues this classification taxonomy, social solidarity is viewed by as a interdependence of individuals within a group from the descriptive and normative perspectives. That is, it contains therein certain community relations that come up with certain duties and obligations. A subclass of that could be cultural solidarity. I think this approach closes the loop. It limits the discourse to certain descriptive and normative framework. Instead of that, I propose another definition of social solidarity. Alongside the approach of Kropotkin mentioned above, let's take Karl Kautsky's Marxist approach premises, two important ones. The first is that the social structure of society is essentially linked to solidarity. To understand the possibilities of solidarity within, and secondly, it's looked as a result of certain social practices. If I try to converge these approaches and come up with the definition of social solidarity should be constructed as existence of social structure in the society where the contributing elements are voluntarily and horizontally taken by the participants, social, economic, religious, cultural, and other networks in constant interaction and developing reproduction in a stable and continual way as a special incarnation of political practices. I consider all components of this definition to be critically important. It's important to understand that the fabric of the society should be coming about through these horizontal voluntary networks, and it's also very important to have the existence, stability, and developing reproduction through social practices of these networks. I believe in the framework of our discourse on the agenda of social solidarity. This definition and this approach may indicate to us the mechanisms and the solutions as to what needs to be done. So, why agenda? This may be one of the pivotal questions. I think we all can ask this question to ourselves of late. We start talking about things that we've been thinking about for a long time, but in the past, we didn't think it would be appropriate or expedient to talk about it. So it's very important now that this discussion only becomes meaningful alongside the implementation of the political revolution. Of a revolution implemented on the basis of political solidarity. This process made it possible to talk about social solidarity as well. So there is a need to understand how the newly formed government associates with solidarity. Is it a yardstick of parasitic solidarity? Is it political solidarity? Does it have the potential to transform into social solidarity? And what is the extent to which it also covers civic solidarity. Now, with your permission, I would like now to reflect on the government's program to penetrate this agenda. The government program considers a priority to enshrine values, reinforce values. That's their first opening sentence. The axis of the government plan is to take the non-violent democratic velvet revolution and enshrine its values. Then they continue on to list these alleged values. The second one makes a direct reference to solidarity. I quote, "Rule of law and equality of everyone before the law is what the national unity should be based on, alongside civic solidarity." This is confusing because there is a reference to two different eventualities. National unity, which seems to be steering towards the ethnical commonality, and it's obvious that the existence of the diaspora makes it impossible to expand the provisions on rule of law and equality before the law. And on the other hand, there is the civic commonality, which is beyond the ethnic constraints. This solidarity is hinged on formal legal requirements and basis. So if we go back to the previous quote, the rule of law and equality before the law are referred to as the two basic mechanisms which will lead to assuring solidarity. I think that building social democracy on the basis of the latter has been proven impossible more than once by a whole range of authors. National unity based on law is viewed as the prerequisite of an important prerequisite of assuring Armenia's internal and external security. In the internal security segment of the government program, there are two duties: restoring the level of trust towards the law enforcement and prevailing a law-abiding, intellectual, respectful citizen, cognizant of his own rights and those of the others. This segment culminates in the following idea: violence-free society agenda should lead towards a higher level of civic solidarity. Political prisoners should be released from prison, and we should arrive at the utmost level of civil solidarity. I didn't misread it. In the same sentence, they refer twice to as high a level as possible of public solidarity. Repeating this notion twice in the same sentence does not make it clearer as to how you get there and through what methods. One of the paradoxes of solidarity that I refer to, that is freedom of individual and balancing it with the public duties and obligations, is absolutely absent in the government program. No reference to it whatsoever. And this is one of the main problems of this text. The government program ostensibly assumes two actual subjects. One of them is the government itself. The second is the individual, free, dignified, and happy citizen. This relationship does not assume any collective or political subjects. It fragments the society down to the level of an individual citizen, and in the event of the latter uniting, this creates a confusion about the nation or the people. These are deemed to be too mythical to ever be real. The political solidarity based on inequality or injustice may have a chance to turn into social solidarity only provided it makes it possible to enshrine injustice vis-à-vis various groups. The main issue of unfairness is viewed by this government through the process of forming the cabinet, which has led in the past lacking public trust in significantly eroding social solidarity. The definition of injustice should list all circumstances that pertain to injustices towards various groups such as women, ethnic and other minorities, socioeconomic polarization, injustices, and so forth. In other words, the agenda of social solidarity cannot be formed as an agenda of the formation of more reliable mechanism. It should be. I would like to remind you, I think it was in May 16, when within one day concurrently various protest demonstrations took place. They were so concerning that the call to end them were made both by Nikol Pashinyan. Another text was stated by Zhanna Andreasyan. With your permission, I'll quote and concluded that. For any revolution, the most important trial period is the immediate wake of its triumph. In this period is when, enthused and inspired by the victory, the activists revert to uncoordinated, sporadic action, trying to use the same revolutionary methods to address a lot of local issues that were accumulating over years. This is exactly what we are witness to currently. Throughout the entire territory of the Republic, they take place. Protest rallies take place, not coordinated by the revolution leaders. Nairi, Dagarak, copper molybdenum, milk producers, dairy farmers, cab drivers, car importers, Sasnatzer supporters, university problems, schools and preschool headmasters, Yerevan City Hall and District Authority discontent, Sevan Church, summer residence lands, military commissariat services. Everyone who is discontent with all these come to the street. All of these and their demands, with a few exceptions, are completely justified, but this ignores an important circumstance. Pashinyan today is the head of the state, the Prime Minister of Armenia. The biggest duty thereof is to assure the regular operation of public administration. Although, however, frank and earnest rallies, closing streets, disrupting traffic, by the end of the day, not intentionally though, are going against Pashinyan himself. The main criteria of the stability of any state is the stability of its public machinery. So this factor did work. We saw how Petrosyan's text turned into practice. Sporadic rallies are phasing out and manageability comes to the forefront. But manageability also has always a downside. The emergence of collective mindset where thinking is not a necessary prerequisite and is not everybody's turf. The difference between collective mindset and solidarity is the degree of cognizance of the process by every individual. During collective thinking, you do not have people thinking. Others could think and program their behavior in their stead, whereas solidarity is formed by critically minded socium. That's the real agenda of social solidarity. Thank you.